Hello, Kim. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Hi, Erik. I love you. And thank you so much for helping me with what our project has been lately, which has been a fascinating one that I will reveal to the world eventually.
And he says, my pleasure, and I love you also, Mom. So,
Okay. Um, it's been such a meaningful thing we've been doing together to help so many people. And I'm just
mhm.
so excited about it, although it has taken its toll. It's very difficult. All right. So today we're going to talk about, Kim, drum roll, please.
Lemuria and the Adam and Eve story.
All right. And Atlantis, right? Too, or just that?
And Atlantis, yeah. So actually, Eric is saying I should maybe just start out explaining. We tried to do a channeling a few weeks ago, and it really wasn't turning out too well on Enki and Enlil. But what he said was, you really have to go back to the beginning, Lemuria, understand the Lemurian and the Atlantean cultures before you can talk about that. So then he's been working with me over the last few weeks because Erik. He functions a little differently sometimes. Now he like opens and holds like the portals open so that the I can connect with other energies. So I've been connecting with the Pleiadians and learning about the stories of Atlantis and Lemuria. And so I guess just to start with, okay, so Erik, I'm having him help me. They ran through all this with me before, but um, he's saying millions and millions and millions of years ago, it was decided that Earth would be a genetic experiment. And so, as the Earth was forming, it took actually 4 attempts where they tried to infuse life into it through 8 aliens tried to infuse life, different aliens, and it didn't because the conditions weren't right. It didn't take till the fourth time. So what he said was, as the earth was cooling and forming, beings were trying to implant life forms. He said it happened to be the Anunnaki, who they have a very long distance that they go out into space and come back, so they're only in contact with us not very often. One of the times they were in the Earth's solar system, they happened to be the one that implanted the genetic material to which the first life form emerged from. So, with that, millions of years went on, and then 2 civilizations formed. One was Lemuria, and one was Atlantis. And they worked for millions of years. They worked side by side. The Atlanteans were a little more masculine, male dominated, and the Lemurians, he's saying to start there. So they were real balanced in masculine and feminine energies, the Lemurians were. And so as the earth was ready to inhabit, the way it worked, they're telling me fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensional beings, and they were more crystalline in nature, more etheric, started incarnating on the earth for this experiment. And so I'm talking about Lemuria here as opposed to Atlantis to start with. So
Okay.
all these beings were incarnating on the earth, and I'll explain to you what they each were while the earth was forming. And so in the earth, in the very center of the earth, there's a crystalline iron core. That's called our first dimension. And
Mhm.
that was actually created by the Syrians, that
Oh,
crystalline core.
mm,
Um,
mm.
And so in Lemuria, we had the fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensional beings, and then so this form emerged from the earth, this first life form, and what it emerged as was almost like a lizard type being. That was the being that emerged from the earth, an organic being from the earth.
Was it
And
from the reptilians or? Or is that
I,
something separate?
I guess, or that's just how the cell's divided.
Okay.
They're telling me that's why we have a reptilian brain and a spinal column from that origin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Was it from DNA from the
from the
reptilian?
Anunnakis. So they must be like reptilians or have some reptilian in their genetics. I
Okay.
don't know.
But are Anunnakis, they're not the same as reptilians, are they? Enki kind of had reptilian features, right?
Yeah, I think
But
so.
they were not strictly reptilian, were they?
I don't think so. I think we'll get into that more later,
Oh,
but
okay.
I think they were
Yeah.
maybe more like
When we talk
hybrids.
about, when we have our review of Enki and
Yeah.
Enlil. Yeah. Okay.
So this first being that emerged was more kind of lizard-like. And so over millions and millions of years, the Atlanteans and the Lemurians worked side by side doing genetic experiments until they got to the current form we are as humans today. This took
Okay.
millions and millions of years.
Okay.
And what they're telling me is like some of these, I don't remember what their specific names are, but the other types of humans we've seen that look like cavemen,
Yeah.
what those was they were actual people they created or types of people they created, but only one type made it. It was kind of like the others just didn't have what they needed to make it on the earth. The strongest survived, and that's what we have in the human form now.
Okay.
So all these adaptations were made. And so the earth's forming, and then there's people living on the earth that are more he's telling me they're kind of a little more animalistic in nature. They followed instincts. They didn't quite hold a soul, not like we do today.
Oh.
And at the same time, these star beings from the other planets were existing too. So because and I was actually in Lemuria, so I'm having some memories of this. Erik says, by the way, you were too. So the seventh dimensional people were the Lyrans, and they held a masculine charge, and it was kind of like the charge of the creator or the creative source, I guess you could say. Then the sixth dimensional beings were the Syrians, and what they do is they work with light codes and light formations and make sacred geometry.
Mm-hmm.
And so the charge needs something to form into. So Syrians are kind of feminine in nature, the
Mm-hmm.
Lyrians are masculine. So this is what would create the forms. Then they'd bring it down further into the fifth dimension, which was the Pleiadians, and they worked on the harmonics to solidify it. So things like bullfrogs and insects, all the noises we have on the earth, those were all part of the harmonics to merge the two worlds. So finally, this is what Erik's telling me. Finally, when the um, the Earth was the people of the Earth that were forming in the Earth, when enough genetic changes had been made, they were able to start merging with the star beings and start having children that were from the stars that had more of a soul genetics.
Ah.
And so they started merging, and it happened in Lemuria. It happened naturally when it was ready. See, when we were in Lemuria, because we were fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensional beings, we didn't like separate into our dimensions. We understood everything. So as seven, this is the way Erik's explaining it to me, as seven dimensional beings, we barely had any inclination that we were separate. It was like a unity consciousness, heart
Oh,
center.
nice.
And so when it sank down to the fifth level, that's the level of divine will. And this was supposed to be free will. But because none of us really realized we were separate from our source and each other, we only followed divine will because we didn't know.
Mm.
So what the actual story of Adam and Eve is, the way Erik is
Oh, I
explaining it from
see
the
where you're going.
Lemurian perspective,
Mm.
was that it was more of an offer that, okay, in order for us to bring this genetic experimentation into human form, we need to have you drop your consciousness just a bit so you can perceive yourself as separate from source,
Mm.
because they couldn't perceive it and they weren't, I guess it just didn't occur to them. So they had to drop the consciousness a bit so
Why?
that,
Why do they want to do that?
because they wanted to start having biological physical beings on the earth that were like hybrids, that were earth beings and star beings, so that
So
they
they
have
wanted to
soul.
basically, the whole thing is they wanted to not just understand the concept of like love, they wanted to experience themselves. They wanted to experience all. I mean, it's, you can understand the concept of hot, but you have to experience cold to really understand hot. That kind of
Right, right. And they didn't even understand the contrast that they could have like a separate awareness or a separate
Oh, okay. So they wanted to,
separate
yeah, they wanted to
separate will from the source. So they had to drop it a tiny bit so they could see themselves as separate, so that they could start conceiving children.
yeah.
And
Oh,
then that's how the star beings started. And Erik is telling me, and I keep saying God, and he's saying God. So there were,
okay.
we considered our home planets to be like God, and we could communicate with them.
Telepathically, I guess, huh?
Telepathically, we
Yeah.
were always connected. So once that happened and we were able to start dropping into form by realizing our will was separate from the creators, then we could start merging the two worlds, because it was supposed to be heaven and earth merged.
Okay.
So from my perspective, and from what Erik and the Pleiadians are saying, that was heaven on earth when the two worlds merged like that. And they're telling me that we even, um, some of the women even conceived children with these alien beings that we thought were gods as well, also to
Which
get, I don't know, more of their genetics.
which
Eric's
aliens?
telling me they had to have certain elements with them to even hold form in our world when they
Which
come into our world, because
okay,
they
which
were there.
aliens? The Pleiadians or
Like people from the Pleiades and
oh,
people
okay.
from Sirius and Lyrans, like their beings, we would even I guess the words mate with them as well.
Actual
So,
mating or test tube or
well, in the beginning, it was always in laboratories that we were doing these experiments. By the time the Earth dropped in consciousness to where the star beings and the Earth beings were mating, it was actual mating.
wait, so were they humanoid enough for
They
that
were
to
humanoid enough by that point where
it's kind
the
of
mating could occur. Because
kind of
before that, it wasn't going to happen. I guess they didn't have, the form just probably wasn't right yet to hold the vessel of the spirit.
okay.
So the story of Adam and Eve then, because the serpent is, in the Bible, it talks about a serpent tempting Eve to eat an apple, and it makes it sound like that was the fall of humanity, because Eve was tempted by the serpent that most people probably think is the devil.
I heard
But
it was stinky.
well, what it actually is, yeah, it. I always interpreted it as the devil. Maybe that was just my interpretation, but back to things they used to tell you when you were kids.
Yeah.
But what it was because that first being that came out of the earth was a lizard-like being. That's why they use the symbol of the serpent, because
Oh,
it's the
that's not
beings that rose from the earth mixed with the spirit beings. That's what it was. The other thing Erik's telling me it represents, because they use a serpent to represent the rising of the Kundalini exercise, Kundalini
oh,
energy,
wow.
which is at the base of the spine.
Yeah.
So in Lemuria, that was the perspective, and that's how it was happening. And so it was a very natural thing, and it was never that Eve is lower, because men and women were really equal there.
Wow.
Um, Also, the other thing I didn't realize that they're telling me is that in order for a conception and a pregnancy to occur, we actually, well, maybe the pregnancy could occur, but we actually had to petition like a galactic council for a soul to come to us.
Wow.
And if you weren't ready or something wasn't right, permission just wasn't granted. It wasn't just everybody having just as many children as they want. It was kind of monitored so that the right children went with the right parents, that kind of thing.
So, Eric, how was that? What factors were uh, were factored into that decision? What's going on with this little piece of hair? Down, down, boy.
He says it had a lot to do with the maturity level of the parents and if they could really handle the job. Sometimes they had to wait a few years to learn more about love or compassion or
Oh.
whatever it was. It was mainly that. And sometimes you would just see that it wasn't going to be a good fit, and we would maybe have to wait till next time. The other interesting thing they did in Lemuria was they followed the moon. And so all the women had their cycles at the same time.
Oh
They
yeah.
were all imbalanced around the full moon, and they had ceremonies, and they would, I guess, like pray to like what we would consider today to be like fertility gods to have a pregnancy occur. So then once permission was granted, the pregnancy would occur and, the children were born.
So the men
But
were like, "Oh my God, let's go hunting. That
yeah,
time's coming."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm kidding.
So then, okay, so now for millions of years, Eric's saying you have to realize these two civilizations were different, but they peacefully coexisted and worked together. Because in Lemuria, what we learned and what we knew is that we were co-creating with God.
With what?
With God, we were
Oh, okay, okay.
co-creating.
Got it. Got it. It's fascinating. I'm writing some stuff down.
Now, in Atlantis, the other civilization, they were more masculine dominated.
Oh.
The Atlantean civilization was also influenced by the Anunnaki. Now, in the Atlantean civilization, it was masculine, it was a lot of technology, but they weren't balanced because they didn't see females and women as being co-partners with them. They saw them as less than.
Is that why they failed as a civilization? Or was it some cataclysm? Because I know there's this
Well, it's
cataclysmic
both.
cycle every 25.9 thousand years, right?
Yes, it was kind of both. Because what happened was, all right, so they were out around this time. I think the wars started.
The
The
Great Galactic
two
Wars.
civilizations were warring. The Atlanteans, because they were not becoming as they had technology, but they were not becoming as powerful co-creators because they
Oh,
didn't recognize the feminine aspect. They were jealous.
yeah.
So they started warring with the Lemurians
Why? What was the war
because
about?
they wanted people to follow them as the supreme civilization. They wanted to be the rulers of the earth, the ones that everybody looked to. And they saw that I keep saying Pleiadians because I was Pleiadian there. The Lemurians, because they were balanced, kept getting much more power. So
Mm.
there were wars. So when the Anunnaki, they influenced the story the way it's told in the Bible, and
Yeah.
they told their people that way that Eve was created out of a rib from
Mm.
Adam, which wasn't really true. Eric's telling me that as these beings emerged from the earth, some had Y chromosomes and some had X chromosomes. Both types of beings emerged. And
Mm.
then there were genetic experimentations.
Well, and then Christianity and other religions sort of morphed the Sumerian or interpreted the Sumerian text quite differently too.
Right. And a lot of the things were taken out of the Bible because they didn't want people to recognize the true power that, masculine and feminine energy have together.
Yeah.
there's a male god, there's a male aspect to a creator and a female aspect to the creator. That's
Mhm.
just the way it works, and it can't work any other way. Well, they wanted to completely wipe out the female aspect. And so that's what
Not gonna
the
work.
warring was about. Yeah.
You want Papa happy, you make Mama happy.
Yeah. So then, I don't know. I think we have time. Do you want to talk about how the flood happened then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the beings that were the Atlanteans, they were jealous and warring with Lemurians over this feminine power and because they had more power. So,
Bastards.
yeah. Well, that's what we thought of them in Lemuria. Anyways, so then they, at some point, the planet started getting infiltrated with beings that weren't supposed to be here. And many of these were reptilian type beings. So then, okay, in the Lemurian culture, everything was very natural. I didn't see like any real structures or buildings. It would be like log houses or houses carved out of big boulders, that kind of thing. Atlantis, they were building. We had buildings, we had structures. Lemuria, we didn't eat meat. In Atlantis, we did. I could see those two differences.
Okay.
So this warring and this jealousy starts, and the Atlanteans realize that the Lemurians were so powerful because of the masculine and feminine energy balance.
Yeah.
And the Lemurians were working with crystals and with all kinds of nature. Well, we got in Lemuria and the Atlantis beings that were like reptilian. I actually had a past life in Atlantis during the flood, and I'm remembering this. Because we had many lifetimes in both Lemuria and Atlantis,
Wait,
many
which
past
one is the
lifetimes.
older civilization? Lemuria, right?
Lemuria started sooner, but they existed side by side. Yeah, Eric saying Lemuria.
Okay, what's the one that starts with the M? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to just get this straight. There's one that starts with the M. It's a short name like Mur or Mir. I don't know. Meerkat. No, I'm kidding.
Um, oh, Lemuria, there's another, Lemuria was also called Mu
I don't
or
know. I can't remember.
something like that. Maybe that's what you're thinking. Yeah,
Yeah,
it had another name that
there's
started with
another,
M.
there's a third one, but I can't remember. It's okay. I'm taking you down a rabbit hole, as I usually do.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Okay. So, anyways, the Atlanteans had a being. Um, his name was Azure.
Oh,
He had blue skin. And he was one of the ones that came in. This is in the section that I was in, because I actually remember this. I've gotten to this memory. He started influencing the people and trying to start a hierarchy and governments and all this, and he was causing a lot of problems. And then, meanwhile, on the earth, the human experimentation had gotten really out of hand with some people where it was cruel,
oh no.
where they would steal organs from people, human animal experimentations. It was no longer being, and this was the Atlanteans more than the Lemurians, it was no longer being done in a co creative way with God. It was being done in a cruel way. And so the energies on the planet were getting really messed up. So the Atlanteans, backed by this guy named Azure, he had bluish skin, started pointing these huge, large generator crystals at the moon. And Eric tells me they actually had nuclear technology. And I know this is going to sound strange. I've told this to other people, and they say, no way, it's no way that could happen, but it's being confirmed, it's real. We actually had at the time 2 moons in the sky
Ooh.
because there was a galactic council above Enki and Lil, any of these people, and they were not going to let a planet destroy themselves because it has ramifications out into other planets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they knew they were trying to shoot at the moon, that they had the crystals and the nuclear warheads or whatever they
Gonna
were
hurt. It's
aimed at the
gonna
moon.
like
Because
crystals.
what they were going to do was they thought if they wiped out the moon, that it would take the feminine power away. Because remember, I told you we all
Oh,
celebrated the moon and our cycles
yeah.
with the moon and followed the moon cycles.
No.
So they got this idea that if they destroyed the moon, then the feminine power in the Lemurians would be lost.
No more periods. I'm kidding.
Yay, yeah, no more Earth either. But
Ugh.
so the Galactic Council, knowing this was a possibility, somehow moved another structure in place in case they did actually blow it up.
Wow.
So they blew it up. That's what caused the tidal wave and the flood.
Oh, wow.
And then the other structure moved into place. And so now when the flood happened, they knew it was happening. The galactic councils and that. No one was to be told because there was such horrendous, I guess you would say, evil on the earth. There needed to be a cleansing because you can't let planets start destroying themselves and other planets around them. They knew that those that were still connected to source would get the inclination from their source to get away. So no one was to be told. Of course, Noah was told and he wasn't supposed to be told, but many people got away. Some went in caves, some went
Yeah.
underground, some got away by boat. I happened to be one of the ones that survived. In that, my name was Helene. Jay, my twin flame, was my aunt in that lifetime. When we got away, we got away by boat. I didn't know this because Eric's telling me that right now we're kind of like in an Atlantis rising. People are experiencing the trauma they experienced in that lifetime.
Mm.
So me, my parents, and my identical twin sister that I didn't know I had till recently got away in a boat. While we were going, we went up and around a wave. And my baby sister, well, we were twins, but I was 3 minutes older and I took that seriously. She fell out of the back of the boat. I was hanging on to her and I couldn't hold on to her any
Oh.
longer. Yeah. And she was sucked away. Okay. So we found dry land. And I don't know how long this took till things kind of started straightening around. But it's like you came out after the flood and nothing was the same. The consciousness on the planet had dropped so much, we could no longer connect with our star people. Before that, we didn't really know death, because we could connect with people after their physical body died. We didn't know what death was. And all of a sudden they're just gone and we can't communicate with them.
You didn't know she died. You just couldn't connect with her?
Yeah, no, I just couldn't connect with her. I have visions of me sitting against a palm tree, looking out at the ocean, waiting for someone. I was waiting for her to come back in the water.
So the structure that was put in place, okay, so why, I thought the structure put in place was going to shield the moon, the one of the moons, right? It didn't?
It was sitting side by side. And the one got blown up and the other one, the way Erik says, it left like a void and it just kind of got pulled right in there. They were sitting side by side.
What got pulled in there?
The artificial or whatever planet or artificial moon they had sat next to the real moon. When they destroyed the real moon, the other one just kind of, I guess because it left a void, it just kind of got pulled into the right place.
So the moon that we see is an artificial moon.
It wasn't our original one. I don't know if it's.
I heard that it's an artificial moon.
Erik's saying you're right. You're right.
So why is the flood? So the flood happened because the moon is kind of a water thing.
The tide. It's connected with the tide, and it did something with the gravitational pull of the Earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go on with your story. Do you know what land that coordinates?
It looks like Hawaii. It looks like Hawaii from what they're showing me. Yeah. It could have been any tropical island though, but it looks very much like Hawaii. Yeah, was where we landed.
So what happened to Lemuria?
It was just gone after that.
Wow.
I mean, the land masses were different. The people were
Oh,
broken up. A lot of them got away.
wow.
So I was 8 when this happened, and then I grew up and had children and that kind of thing. But the thing was, when the waters receded, everything was so different. Before that, how it was in Lemuria, like if you look at a flower and you'd look into it and it would notice you're looking at it, it would become alive and animated with your energy. You could see its microscopic parts and it
Yeah.
would move around and change colors. Our
Yeah.
plants were alive. Suddenly, none of that was happening. We couldn't hear our relatives. Time slowed to a snail's pace because when we were seventh dimensional, fourth and fifth, time spun much faster. We could create instantly. So, say we wanted to go fishing, we would go fishing, and the elementals would set it up so we'd catch lots of fish. Boom, 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 boom. Now that there was this time lag and we were no longer connected, we could maybe spend 3 days fishing before we'd catch something.
So we're
So
talking
the
about,
whole
no
world had
wonder I
changed.
never catch fish. So when you talk about elementals, you mean the fairies, the wood nymphs, and some of
They're, yeah,
okay.
yeah, they're in the second dimension. Eric's saying, explain this. The way it works is the sixth dimension, the ones like the Syrians that were working on the light codes,
Okay.
they would start the creation in light formation and they would align with the elementals that would bring all the circumstances needed for that event to happen. And
Okay.
it used to happen instantaneously until the fall of Atlantis.
Okay.
And then Eric says the other thing after Atlantis fell, you know how the story got twisted in the Bible, and some of the books have been taken out of the Bible because they didn't want people to know what really happened in their
Yeah.
feminine power. He
Yeah.
said it wasn't only that. He said people were used to channeling and connecting with their guides.
Mhm.
So people would get messages that they thought were from the guides. And Eric's saying it wasn't from the guides at all because they weren't connected any longer. It was whatever they were thinking in their head. So that's where some of the distortions in the biblical text came in because people weren't even channeling. They were just talking to their mind and making up.
So,
They thought they were channeling, but they were really making up stuff.
so what dimension, I mean, yeah, what dimension did our consciousness drop to?
Third dimension.
Yeah, so where we are
Third.
now.
Yeah, and then you had the astral realm in between, which we used to be able to see through to see these other dimensions. No more. It was very thick.
Sucks.
We couldn't do anything.
Thanks, Atlantis. I always heard that the Atlanteans were so evolved and advanced, and the women were tall, but I guess
They
that
were,
was
they
okay.
were, but they weren't that. They were
Yeah,
technology
oh, I got
advanced.
you. Okay, gotcha.
Where the Lemurians
Hmm.
were more organically earth-centered people.
Okay, I got you. Okay, I'm running this
And
off.
so then, all the stories were lost. Oral traditions got handed down. They've been distorted over the years.
Oh man.
Pretty much what I'm understanding Eric to say is like our populations that would be more considered native to our planet and more natural, like the Mayans, the Native Americans,
Yeah.
probably the I want to call them Hawaiians, but Polynesians, those type, maybe Australians. Those were the type of people from Lemuria.
I'm wondering if how many survived, you think?
Let me see if I can get a number from Eric.
I mean, just how many figures? Three figure, four figure, five figure?
I'm between like about 10 and 12,000.
Wow. Did some of those go ashore to influence the Mayan civilization, for example,
Mhm.
or yeah,
Uh,
the
they,
Aztec and all that?
yeah, yeah. Wherever they landed, the civilizations, wherever they landed or they hid
All
when
that
they came
stuff.
out, they started civilizations like the Mayans would have been the Lemurians.
Oh, what about the
Probably
Olmecs?
more. like the Romans would have been the Atlanteans, that kind of thing.
Oh, what about the Olmecs?
The Olmecs?
Olmecs, Olmec.
Okay, let me ask
The
here.
big old heads with the big lips.
Atlantean.
Okay, what about the Aztecs? And the
Lemurian.
Mexican Quetzalcoatl, he was probably was Inky. Actually, come back.
I didn't quite, I'm not giving anything on that. I'm not
Okay.
sure if that's accurate or not.
Anything else before we close up? I gotta go probably.
Eric's saying no, not unless if you have any questions. That's just kind of the basics of how that started. Oh, he is telling me something else. He says one more thing to touch on. So you know how we hear of civilizations that had like they'd sacrifice children or they'd sacrifice animals or virgins or all that.
Yeah.
That started he says it was going on some in, like, if you would want to call them evil or nefarious fractions. It was going on a little bit before the fall of consciousness. But what he said was after the fall of consciousness, people didn't know what happened and they started making up stories that God was angry and that was a punishment.
Yeah.
So they started making up ways to appease the gods. So that's where all that happened. And it really wasn't a punishment, it was a natural consequence for what they were doing. They destroyed themselves, and the Galactic Federation was not going to let them destroy the universe or galaxy or whatever. I'm not good at that stuff. So
Yeah. So that was the Enlil thing, probably.
well, Enki was the one that was a little more aggressive, and Enlil was a little kinder.
No, it was the opposite.
It was the opposite.
Yeah.
Enki, no?
Enlil wanted to use humans to as slaves. Enki was the snake who was trying.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm getting the two mixed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Thank you, Kim,
You're
from
welcome.
embodied-light.com, which I'll put right here. Thank you, Erik. I love you both, and we will get back to helping people with our secret mission.
Okay, love you too. And Erik says, love you, Mom. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Catch you soon.
Okay.